There's something real eerie and serene about this place beyond its obvious, strange implications. The air is oxygen and nitrogen in the ocean. You can hear the little waves. There's not that many big waves because as I said, the moon has been lost. The ocean's much calmer and so are the weather patterns. Daytime or night, there's a serenity about it. And then it comes to you. It's the serenity of a tomb. But of course, I'm still alive. And a couple of thousand others. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is John Patrick Sutherland, coming to you from Kugel's Castle on the dying earth at the end of time. And this is my fourth broadcast. Anyways, they brought us forth. We were dazed and confused, and I told you the first thing you noticed was these giant taloned hands seizing you in your stupor, and you think you're in hell because these giant Zell warriors have got a hold of you in their conic helmet and their red eyes and their forearms and huge muscles, and they weigh about 500 pounds and they stand about 7 feet tall. And they can move you around pretty easily and prod you with their little spear cattle prod club things that they carry, which also double as directed energy weapons, which can vaporize a man who would suddenly try to become violent or protest his treatment. And so they took us all dazed and stunned, threw us in these pens. And I was very fortunate because I was thrown into a very unique pen. As I said, the higher inner walls overlooked the ocean, and the outer courtyard where most of the pens were created and stored. They were nothing but 5-foot-tall metal enclosures open to the sky. Some of them had, later on, they installed caged roofs on us, but my group was able to avoid that for the necessary amount of time. And we had this particularly good view not only of the outer courtyard, but the inner courtyard, the machine. The size of the machine, it was a very large place, apparently some kind of a marshalling ground in the far, far distant past. And they dug up us humans from the far, far, far distant past and put us in these pens, and we could observe the aliens as they trafficked with their ships in the cove, and the dumpsters loaded the machine, and the newly minted, reeking, stinking bodies emerged every night and accumulated, and were marched out into the outer courtyards and put in their pens. We in our pen were able to observe all this. Now, humanity got two breaks, as I mentioned. The first break was that apparently the machine had a built-in universal transmitting capability that permitted everybody within a certain radius of the machine's signal to understand one another, yet we all spoke our native tongues, from English and Old English to the Latin languages and the German languages and the Altaic languages and the ancient Greek and the ancient Latin and what have you. We were all able to understand one another and understand the Zell, who, by the way, didn't speak to us. They preferred, the soldiers of the Zell preferred simply to abuse us, although we did try to speak to them. And every morning and in the late night, we watched the bodies emerge, and the screams and the shrieks of surprise and pain. And we watched the aliens begin their little series of interrogations and experiments and concentration camp-like abuses that are, I guess, all lab animals are subjected to at one point or another. That's how they viewed us, folks, lab animals. We were specimens to be investigated, and they needed living, breathing, screaming specimens to satisfy their unique curiosities. And so as we were brought into the world anew, we were seized upon and thrown into pens. And they have despoiled us quickly of whatever they believed might be a weapon or a threat. They weren't too afraid of us. They were much bigger and stronger and could hurt us, but they didn't take any chances. Anything that looked like a weapon was seized upon. And well, the machine brings you into existence with everything you had on you when you died. So there was humans in there from emerging from a complete state of nudity up to and including full 21st century battle armor and weaponry and ordnance. I myself came through with my GI fatigues, my GI belt, my munitions belt with a lot of good ammo on it, my M16, of course, my Model 1911 45, my personal 44 Ruger Magnum Peacemaker that I inherited from my father, and my 18-inch Italian bayonet that I inherited from my grandfather, who used it in 1914, 1918. So you see, there is somewhat of a military tradition in my family, although I did not become involved in that until my second life, which is another story that comes later. And so they despoiled us of our weapons, and they put us in these pens, and whenever they took a weapon, they took it and threw it on a pile. That pile, they didn't seem to be too threatened by our weapons or too interested archaeologically, at least not the warriors. That wasn't in their brains for that kind of thing. They'd take the weapon, throw it in a pile. The pile grew in the right place, happened to be right underneath the parapet where our pen stood, and we watched them throw the weapons in. Folks, there was everything that you could imagine from across the ages. Of course, there was M16s, M1s. There was 50 calibers, 32s, there was 45s, there was 9 millimeters, there was Berettas. There was German Mausers, there was British Enfields, there was Tommy guns, BARs, every type of edged weapon ever invented: spears, axes, broadswords, Roman gladius, scimitar, cavalry sabers. Every time a human being came through with a weapon, they threw it on a pile directly under us. The height of the pile soon reached very near the roof of the floor of the parapet, and we could just see the stuff under us like the treasure of the ages. And it occurred things, of course, we could speak to each other, although there wasn't much speaking. Mostly in the beginning, there was a lot of watching what the Zell did. And in the beginning, in the pen, there was no amenities. There was no open to the air. There was no blankets. There was no beds. There was no cooking utensils. There was very little food. Eventually, the Zell did figure out that they would have to feed us, and they began to provide us with implements and objects which came along with the machine, which we were able to make use of and improve the conditions of our survival. But this only happened gradually, and there was casualties taken constantly as different members of different cells. Pens were taken for their interrogation. It dawned on us that sooner or later our time would come, and that we would need, people didn't come back from the castle when they went down into the dungeons to the experiments, the interrogations. We heard the screamings. We smelled the smells. People didn't come back. Nobody came back to tell us what was going on. We knew it wasn't good. And so it was pretty clear that we needed a plan, and that we would have to be an executable plan that was doable, because I guess being back was one second chance. It wouldn't be a second chance if we muffed it. And so we began to think about ways to escape and somehow turn the tables on these aliens who think they knew who. The arrogance of them is really something even greater than the smell, which is somewhere between a cattery and a reptile house. And they were bad-mannered and had all kind of nasty habits. And like I said, we were viewed as specimens. Not only specimens, maybe even prey, at least as far as the warrior class was concerned. So the first contact with aliens, folks, was something out of a science fiction horror film that you would see on Saturday afternoon, but it was real. And we were back again, alive. And the first break that humanity had was that we could talk to each other. The second is that we had the weapons. Well, weapons, you say. How'd you get so many weapons? Well, the way we got the weapons was that one of the aspects of the machine's function was that it continuously would dig, the Zell kept digging up the weapons and the warriors for us. One of the aspects of the machine's function was that it would bring you back with everything you had when you died, and apparently soldiers or warriors that had died in wilderness battles where the bodies and equipment had not been recovered came through with everything that was around them at the time in the way of war implements or war supplies. Therefore, I had my full battle kit on me, as did many, many others from many different time periods, and I'll get into that in much greater detail later. So they took our weapons and threw them on the pile, but they were tantalizingly close, and we obviously knew that there had to be a plan, and that we needed warriors and we needed leaders, and of course the Zell machine had dug them up for us. And so we decided to bide our time and make a plan, and then make our move. I think that's enough for one night, folks.